By way of reintroduction, because most of you are probably in the session this morning, my name is Bob Handley, and I'm the volunteer facilitator for this session. I'm the knowledge manager at JSOC. Anybody not listen to the keynote this morning?
That's what I'm here is because of the keynote.
Yeah, I think that. Wasn't that compelling?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, you're going to get more good stuff from Dr. Karen. The session here is titled as Cultural
Shift or drift.
Shift or drift
Yeah.
of the networks, and probably like a lot of organizations, you're trying to figure out, okay, how can I leverage this woman and her knowledge stocks? And probably, as I was mentioning to the gentleman over here, until this morning, you probably didn't realize the import impact of anthropology on what we do. Doesn't it make sense? Okay. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Karen, and we'll go from there.
Great, thanks. Well, good. I know you all have heard the earlier comments then. So the reason why the session's titled the way it is because if we don't do anything and then we try to implement change, then the change might take it for a short while, and then after about a year or two, it slowly drifts back to where it was before. And if you want to produce really sustainable change, in other words, to produce the real shift where it really stays where it's supposed to be or what you had in mind, then we have to pay attention to these networks. So a lot of times people start change efforts, they try to do a lot of things around the change effort, but if they don't really leverage the networks, then they'll drift back generally. So that's the meaning behind the title. And then what I thought I would do to get us started is I'm going to have a couple of slides from the earlier session just to reorient us, and then I'm going to go into some more case discussion and the practical how-tos. Okay, because you can only do so much for an hour in the morning. So just to reorient you, I'm spending a lot of time talking about social capital. If you take a look at the networks, they're all about the social capital. This is the stuff that you already measure, so this is fantastic, and most people do this really well. But when they do this and they measure people on this and they don't measure them on that, and they wonder why they don't get the output that they want or the performance that they want from their people, and that's because they're only measuring on, well, let's call it 50% of the equation. If you got measured on 50% of what you did, how would you feel? So a lot of times when people complain that they don't get recognized for the work that they do, it's not because they're whining, it's because they really are only getting recognized for the human capital component of what they do. That's not wrong, it's just half, it's right, it's just half right. So the whole point is that we want to come up with better measures for that, which is social capital, which is looking at the networks. So when we spoke about it earlier this morning, I talked about only 80% of knowledge is not written down, which is a big chunk. So we want to try to measure that part of social capital. So now, just to reorient you one last time on this, the reason why most change fails is because of this. I'm at the center of my universe. I know who I'm connected to. And I pick up the phone, I call my colleagues, I ask their opinion for something. They give me their opinion. I take it as golden, or I weigh it with the opinions of others in my egocentric network. And then I base my decisions and my future actions on the best information that I could get at the time. But that best information, no matter how conscientious we are, is constrained by this factor of the egocentric network. It's not wrong, it's just only partially right. So when we do make decisions, they're fundamentally flawed. We all do. I mean, I'm an expert in social networks. I do the same thing. I make my decisions based upon my egocentric networks, and then I wonder why I didn't get it right. And the reason why I didn't is because I base it on my own personal network instead of looking at the broader network. And about the only way you can really look at the broader network is to use a systematic measure where you do need technology and good mathematical measures to look at this. So when people say, well, how can I be better at what I do? You can be better at what you do by being more aware. Being aware and being a good observer goes a long way to helping you see the potential flaws that you might make or assumptions that you might make based on your egocentric network. But to really systematically measure it, which is what I'm arguing for, is that people really do need to measure whole systems, as in whole organizations or hierarchies. And to do that, you know, it's a bigger problem. A human being cannot see all these interconnections. This is only given to us by virtue of a technology and visualization and mathematics. That Milky Way called LinkedIn is brought to you by technology and mathematics. So, as I said earlier, these are the three major relationships, transactions, authority, and trust, that help us get to where we need to be. Transactions are really simple. They're clean. There's no uncertainty associated with them. I put my credit card into the ATM to buy my ticket. I put my debit card into the ATM. I don't put my credit card into the ATM. Well, I guess I do. I can buy my ticket. I can get cash for the weekend. That's a simple transaction. But if I'm not clear about something, I need to go to my boss. I need to maybe get a team authorized to try to put a team together to solve for a problem. So I need an authority system. But the highest degree of uncertainty can really only be absorbed by a trust-based relationship. And all you have to do is think back in your own personal lives about that. You've had disagreements with maybe family members, terrible things have happened if you've been in an earthquake, or if you were around in New York on 9/11. All those kinds of things really require trust and the solace of those that are around you that embrace you with that trust. Now, a lot of times, most of us know that as family members and community members, but it goes way beyond that. We have trust-based relationships in our professional relationships all the time. In fact, I was just dealing with one today, and she said to me, "I made a mistake. I'm really sorry." I said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get through this together." Because I trust her, she trusts me, and I've got her back. And I know she's got mine. So I said, we'll get through it together. That's trust. So if you're taking a look at the organizational outcomes, most people think of transactions as occurring in the marketplace, but like I said in my earlier comment today, they occur in knowledge markets, which are in any kind of community or organization. Authority-based systems, we'll see anytime you've got a command and control system and a pay structure that goes around that, that's what we call an organization or the firm. And authority-based systems usually operate very well there. Where they don't operate is they don't operate very well laterally, like in these hierarchies that I talked about earlier this morning. And the trust-based relationship realizes its structure in a network. So now, since it is the afternoon, and since you've all had your lunch, I am going to introduce something that I didn't introduce this morning, which are other kinds of ties that bind. There are other ways that you can draw networks. For instance, transactions, authority, and trust, which is where I started, there are other ways in which you can see this. Let me give you an example. There is a transactional network. What kind of network is that? Now, normally I'm talking about the networks up at top, but I thought it would be interesting for you to know that other people draw networks. When people draw the networks on LinkedIn, that's a professional transactional network. You may have trust, you may not have trust. This is a high school network, so for those of you who have children in high school, you may want to close your ears, because this is the network of who has sex with whom in high school. And it's on the web, it's public data, it's research that's been done, and of course the pink and the blue represent girls and boys. And if you look very closely at the structure of that network, there's some very unusual patterns. And there are rules about how this gets carried on in high school. And it's not just in the US. There's other kinds of networks like this that occur in different cultures. But I thought that you'd be interested in some of the other kinds of research. I do not do research in this area. I'm simply presenting it to you. On the other side, there's another kind of interesting network. This is authority-based systems. And so what is that? Well, this is a little bit more rigorous. This is about interpersonal relationships, but it's not about who has sex with whom. It's who's going to get married to whom, who's going to date whom. So it's really more about a engagement or precondition for marriage. It's kind of interesting. Again, it has a very similar structure, a loop structure, and there are a lot of people that are doing research on this all around the world. These are not the areas where I do research, but as you can well imagine, they're kind of interesting. And I thought that you'd be very interested in the network that's drawn up top. That's actually a friendship network. You see how different that is? What does that tell you? It tells me that if you're married to your best friend, you're pretty lucky. Because the friendship networks are denser, they last longer, they're sometimes more durable. And, you know, ironically, we sort of think, okay, who we're going to hook up with, you know, maybe that's more meaningful. Remember when you were in high school and what you thought of? No, that's not very lasting, that's just a transaction. Who do we get married to? Who do we date with? Well, maybe that might last a little longer. But the things that really last the longest are your friends that have got your back.
Arranged marriages?
Yay, well, they learn to like each other. So what ends up happening is that in neurobiology, it's kind of interesting. Because in these transactional networks, when they do some of the research in this area, and they take a look at this kind of network about who does what to whom, it occurs in the most primitive parts of the brain. Duh, you know, in the cerebellum. The calculating who's going to marry whom, where's the bride wealth, where's the dowry, all that kind of stuff, all those kinds of financial production and reproduction networks is in the front part of the brain. That's where that gets activated, the neocortex. How am I going to preserve my family wealth, blah, 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 all those kinds of calculations. And the friendship network, the densest one, activates in the limbic system. So, even though I'm not a neurobiologist, I have to say that from the early research that's been done on this in the neuroscience, it really looks like what part of the brain gets activated when trust is enabled is a very central part of the brain which links both halves together. So I'm looking forward to the next 5 or 10 years of research in this. And I'm only presenting this to you in the lightest of ways, but I thought it would be kind of interesting. Not something for a keynote, but for a discussion. Okay. Perhaps over drinks at 5 o'clock. But that brings us back to the primordial network here, where I'm talking about that's you at the top, that's your spouse on the left, that's your spouse's mother on the right, and you're suddenly squeezed at this point because you're not a happy camper because you've had a disagreement with your spouse passes a message along to the unbroken bond between the mother and the child, and then the mother makes sure that you understand her displeasure that you have not treated her child in the manner to which he or she has become accustomed. So that little tiny tripartite network really drives a lot of familial relationships, and it drives a lot of professional relationships, which get played out on a larger scale inside organizations. So you've got little tripartite things in here, little triads that you can analyze, but I thought that you'd be interested to look at just this one network. The structure of it looks very different, but I'm going to present to you a deeper part of the methodology now. I'm going to go into different networks, because this is only the work network, and when you really are measuring a culture, what you want to do is you want to be able to look across brands of knowledge, types of knowledge. Work is only one part of that. But in an opening salvo for this morning, I just stayed right here on the work network, but I'm now going to show you some other networks. But I think it's really interesting. I know this is not the sexiest image, you know, the ones from LinkedIn are kind of nice, but I like the crude image because it keeps it simple, and you can contrast it to the command and control system, which is always going to be there. I personally love hierarchy. It's elegant, it's beautifully structured, it can tolerate very little uncertainty or ambiguity. It can manage small amounts of risk really well. Hierarchies can. But if you overload a hierarchy with too much risk, they're brittle and they'll break. And that's why in every organization you always have the networks. They're like shock absorbers. They'll take the risk because people trust in each other. They'll absorb the greater stress or strains that the hierarchy can't. And so in any organization you have this amalgam of the networks and the command and control systems, and they have a natural tension together, and that's what makes it interesting inside organizations. So, and then, like I said earlier, this is what it looks like